She trembled in chains, begging the cowboy, "Please don't leave me alone tonight." The sun was beginning to set over the dry, dusty plains. The air was heavy with the smell of earth and grass, and a faint wind whispered through the scattered trees. On the edge of the small homestead, a young woman named Clara worked quickly, gathering the last of the evening firewood. She was used to the quiet of the frontier, the endless skies, and the loneliness that came with living far from neighbors. But tonight, the usual peace felt strange. The shadows seemed darker, and every sound carried a little more weight. Clara had grown up learning to care for herself. Her parents had passed when she was a child, leaving her the small homestead that had been in her family for generations. She knew how to cook, clean, and mend the small buildings, but most importantly, she knew how to survive. She was careful, always aware of the dangers that lurked in the wild. Wolves roamed the nearby woods, snakes slithered through the grass, and there were always stories of bandits traveling through the area. She had never been afraid before, but tonight her instincts whispered that something was not right. She paused and looked around. The field stretched wide and empty in all directions, and the forest loomed just beyond the fences. Nothing moved. The only sound was the soft rustle of the wind in the trees and the occasional distant cry of a bird. Clara shook her head, trying to calm herself. Maybe it was just her imagination. She carried the last bundle of wood toward the cabin when she noticed something unusual, a faint shadow moving near the tree line. Her heart quickened. She stopped and squinted, but it was gone. Perhaps a deer, she thought, trying to reassure herself. The sky was turning a deep orange as she placed the wood by the cabin. Inside, the fire was already warm, casting a soft glow over the small room. Clara set down her bundle and closed the door, locking it with the heavy wooden bolt. She leaned against the door for a moment, her hands shaking slightly. Something about the way the shadows moved, the stillness of the air, made her feel uneasy. She told herself to stop worrying. After all, she had lived here for years without incident. But before she could settle, there was a sudden noise outside. A sharp crack, like a branch snapping under weight. Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She held her breath, listening. There it was again, closer this time. Her eyes darted to the window, and her fingers clenched the edge of the table. Something was approaching. He could feel it in the air, the sense of danger that she had never felt so strongly before. Before she could react, the door burst open. 2 men, rough and grim-faced, stormed in. Bess. Clara screamed, but the wind carried her voice away. One of the men grabbed her roughly and she struggled, but their strength was overwhelming. They pushed her down and forced heavy iron chains around her wrists and ankles. She trembled violently, her breath coming in short gasps. "Please, please, don't leave me alone tonight," she cried, her voice raw with fear. The men did not answer. They seemed to enjoy her terror, their expressions cruel. Clara tried to twist and pull free, but the chains were tight and unyielding. Panic surged through her, threatening to overwhelm her. She thought of the wolves, the darkness, the endless miles of empty plains outside. Boughs, alone, chained, and helpless, she felt a cold despair settle over her. The night was closing in, and the fear of what was to come made her body shiver uncontrollably. Far off, across the fields and hidden among the trees, a figure watched. He was a cowboy named Jacob, a man who lived alone in a small cabin a few miles away. He was tall, strong, and used to the harsh life of the frontier. Most people in the area knew him as quiet, serious, and solitary. He rarely spoke, preferring to keep to himself, but those who had met him knew he had a sense of honor and courage that set him apart. Tonight he had been checking his horses when he saw the smoke of Clara's homestead. Something about the way it moved, jerky and irregular, made him uneasy. Jacob moved closer, careful to stay out of sight. He saw the men inside, laughing and pushing Clara around. Jaw tightened. He had never known her well, only seeing her from a distance, but even that was enough. He could not stand by and do nothing. His mind raced as he planned how to intervene. He knew it would be dangerous. The men were stronger, and there were two of them. But he could not ignore the cries of a woman in need.
Clara, meanwhile, was trembling uncontrollably.
Tears ran down her face as she begged over and over for the men to leave her alone. She had never felt so powerless. Memories of her childhood, of her parents, and of the life she had built in this quiet homestead all seemed to flash before her. She clenched her fists, wishing desperately that someone, anyone, would come to help. The darkness of the cabin felt suffocating, and the chains bit into her skin with every movement. Jacob waited until the men had moved away from the door, speaking quietly to each other before making his move. He crept closer, keeping low to the ground, every sense alert. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and the sharp tang of fear. He could see Clara's face, pale and tear-streaked, and he felt a surge of determination. He would not let them harm her, not tonight. With careful, precise movements, he slipped around the side of the cabin and found a way to enter without being seen. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his face calm and his hands steady. Every step was measured, every sound calculated. He knew that if he made a mistake, it could cost both of them their lives. But he also knew that doing nothing was not an option.
Inside, Clara continued to struggle against her chains. Her pleas grew weaker, her voice hoarse from screaming.
She could not see Jacob, but somehow she felt a presence, a sense that she was not entirely alone. Hope flickered inside her, fragile but real. She continued to plead softly. Please, please, her words trailing off into sobs. Jacob moved silently, avoiding the men as he approached Clara. He quickly assessed the chains and found a way to unlock them without alerting the captors. Sweat ran down his face, but his hands were steady. Finally, with a soft click, the chains fell away from her wrists. Clara gasped, relief washing over her in a wave. Grasp. She rubbed her sore wrists and looked up, eyes wide with gratitude and fear. "Stay quiet," Jacob whispered, his voice low but firm. "We need to get out before they notice." Clara nodded, too shaken to speak. Her legs were weak, and her whole body trembled, but she trusted him, somehow. Together they moved toward the back door, careful not to make a sound. The men were still inside, unaware that she was free. Once outside, they ran toward the safety of the nearby trees. Clara's heart raced, and she clung to Jacob, feeling the strength of his presence, breath. Every step was filled with tension, every shadow a potential threat. But with him by her side, she felt a little braver. She knew the night was far from over, but for the first time in hours, she had hope. They paused behind a cluster of trees, catching their breath. Clara's eyes were wide with fear, and her body shook uncontrollably. Jacob placed a steady hand on her shoulder, offering reassurance without words. "Bay." She leaned into him, drawing comfort from his calm presence. For the first time since the attack began, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she would survive the night. The horizon was dark, and the night held dangers unknown. But in that moment, with the chains removed and the cowboy at her side, Clara realized she was no longer completely alone. She still trembled, still feared what might come, but she also felt the first flicker of courage. The journey ahead would be hard, filled with uncertainty and peril. Yet she knew that with him near, she had a chance. And as the wind rustled through the trees and the moon rose high above the plains, Clara whispered again, almost to herself, "Please, don't leave me alone tonight." Jacob did not answer, but he did not leave. His eyes scanned the dark horizon, alert and ready. The night was still long, and the dangers were far from over, but he was there. He would not abandon her. Not now. Not ever. The night was dark and quiet, but the sounds of the wilderness were sharp and clear to Jacob. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the bushes, made him pause and listen. He and Clara had moved away from the cabin where she had been held, deeper into the woods. Her chains were gone, but her fear had not left her. Bah! She clung to him with a trembling grip, and he felt the weight of her terror pressing against his chest. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her it would be all right, but words seemed weak compared to the danger that surrounded them. Clara's legs were unsteady as they moved through the uneven ground. Her heart raced with every step, and the memory of the bandits' cruel faces haunted her.
She whispered softly, her voice shaking. "What if they find us? What if they come after us?" Jacob didn't answer immediately.
He focused on every sound, every movement in the shadows. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice calm and firm. "Best, they won't catch us if we stay careful. Keep close to me and don't make a sound. We can get through this together." Her hand tightened on his arm. Oh. She wanted to believe him, and in the soft steadiness of his voice, a small spark of hope flickered. The woods were thick, and the moonlight barely reached the ground through the branches. Base. It was difficult to see, but Jacob had spent years moving through terrain like this. He knew where to step, how to avoid dry branches that might snap and betray their location. He led her slowly, cautiously, never letting his own fear show. Clara followed, trusting him even though she had only just met him. Hours passed, and the sounds of the night grew louder. Owls hooted in the distance, and the wind shifted, carrying the smell of damp earth and pine. Clara stumbled once, nearly falling into a shallow ditch, but Jacob caught her quickly.
"Be careful," he said, helping her steady herself.
She nodded, biting her lip to stop from crying out in frustration and fear. Every step forward felt like an eternity. Bad. She knew they could not stop, not even to rest. The bandits could be following them, or worse, they could have sent others to track her. As they moved, Jacob thought of a plan. They could not stay in one place. They had to reach a safe location. Somewhere the bandits would not think to look. He remembered a small cabin he had passed a few miles from the forest edge. It belonged to an old friend, a man who owed him a favor. It was isolated, well hidden, and most importantly, it would be safe for the night. He decided that was where they would go. Clara, despite her fear, asked quietly, "How far is it?" Jacob glanced at her, understanding the exhaustion in her voice. "Best." "Not far," he replied. "We'll rest when we get there. Just keep moving." She nodded, though the thought of walking for miles through the night, tired and frightened, made her stomach twist. Her body ached from being restrained for so long, and her mind was on edge. But she kept going, clinging to the hope that they would reach safety. The journey was tense. Every sound made Clara jump, and Jacob had to repeatedly remind her to stay quiet. He noticed how her fear made her flinch at every small movement, how her voice trembled even when she tried to speak softly. He wanted to comfort her, but he knew that speaking too much might draw attention. Instead, he kept a steady presence beside her, moving silently and efficiently, guiding her through the darkest parts of the forest. At one point, they reached a narrow stream. The water reflected the moonlight, casting a faint silver glow. Clara paused, unsure if she could cross safely. Jacob went first, testing the stones to make sure they were steady, but then he held out his hand. "Take my hand," he said. Hesitant but trusting, she reached for it. As she crossed, she felt his strength supporting her. For the first time since the capture, she felt a little safer, as if someone truly was looking out for her. But safety was not guaranteed. Bay. Halfway through the stream, a rustle came from the nearby bushes. Clara froze, her heart pounding. Past, Jacob immediately ducked low and pulled her behind a large rock. The sound came closer, a snapping of branches that suggested something, or someone, was moving toward them. He held a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Clara pressed herself against the cold rock, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her mind raced. Could it be the bandits? Bess.
Or just an animal?
Jacob peeked around the edge of the rock.
In the dim moonlight, he saw a figure moving stealthily. His pulse quickened.
Bah. He could not be sure if it was one of the men who had taken Clara or just a wandering traveler, but he had to assume the worst. Carefully, he found a stick and threw it toward another part of the stream. The figure startled and moved away, giving them just enough time to continue their journey. Clara whispered, "Thank you," barely audible. Jacob nodded but said nothing. Words would not make the danger go away. Action would. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly. Clara's legs were sore, her hands rubbed raw from gripping the trees for balance. Her mind wandered to thoughts of home, of the simple life she had led before the attack. She thought of her small cabin, the quiet mornings, the smell of baking bread, and the warmth of her empty but familiar home. Those memories gave her strength, a reason to keep going. Jacob noticed the way her steps slowed and her shoulders slumped. He matched his pace to hers, silently encouraging her to continue. Finally, in the distance, they saw a faint glow of lantern light through the trees. Jacob's eyes brightened.
That had to be the cabin he had been thinking of. Almost there, he whispered.
Despair. Clara's face lit up with relief, and a small, exhausted smile appeared despite her trembling. They moved faster, careful not to make noise, until they reached the edge of a clearing. The cabin was small and sturdy, with a warm light spilling from its windows. Jacob knocked quietly, and an older man opened the door. After a brief explanation, the man nodded and let them inside. Inside, Clara sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. Jacob knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. Her wrists and ankles were sore, bruised from the chains, but there were no serious wounds. She was exhausted, scared, and emotionally drained, but she was alive. Tears streamed down her face as the tension of the past hours began to release. Jacob placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will hurt you here tonight." Clara leaned into him, grateful for his presence and strength. The cabin was small but warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth. Jacob and Clara settled in, sitting close together for warmth and comfort. They spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts. But Clara was haunted by the memories of her capture, but the fear was slowly giving way to a fragile sense of security. She watched Jacob, noticing the quiet determination in his eyes, the way he kept watch even here in safety. He was not just her rescuer, he was her protector, and she could feel the weight of that responsibility. As the night wore on, the sounds outside faded. The forest seemed quieter, as if the danger had moved on. Clara leaned back in her chair, exhausted but relieved. She whispered again, almost to herself, "Thank you for not leaving me alone." Jacob didn't answer with words, but he gave her a reassuring nod. bare. His eyes scanned the darkened windows, alert to any movement, but he felt confident that for now they were safe. The night had been long, full of fear and uncertainty, but it was also a turning point. Clara had survived the chains, the attack, and the darkness, and she had found an unexpected ally in Jacob. Though she was still trembling, still afraid of what the future might bring, she had hope. The journey ahead would be dangerous, and the road to safety was not yet over, but with him beside her, she felt that she could face whatever came next. And as the fire flickered and the shadows danced across the walls of the small cabin, Clara closed her eyes, letting herself rest for the first time since the nightmare began. The night outside was still dark and full of unknown dangers, but for the first time in hours she felt a small measure of peace. Jacob stayed near her, silent and watchful, a steadfast guardian in the darkness. Together they would face whatever lay ahead, one careful step at a time. The night outside the cabin was silent, almost eerily so. The wind had settled, and the forest seemed still, but Clara could not shake the fear that had settled deep in her chest.
Every shadow in the corners of the room seemed alive. Every crack in the wooden floor sounded louder than it should.
Breast. She sat close to the fire, hugging her knees to her chest, trying to steady her trembling body by it. His presence calm and steady, but even he could feel the weight of the fear that lingered in the air. Clara's mind kept returning to the events of the day. The attack, the chains, the feeling of helplessness. She shivered as she recalled the cold iron biting into her wrists and ankles, the cruel laughter of the men, and the panic that had threatened to consume her. Even though she was now safe, the memories refused to let her rest. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I can't believe that happened. How could anyone be so cruel?" Her voice was quiet, trembling with emotion. But Jacob heard her. He moved closer, sitting on the floor beside her. His gaze was steady, not intrusive, just there to offer reassurance. "They can't hurt you here," he said quietly. "Nah. Now, you're safe." "I won't let anything happen to you." Clara glanced at him, her wide eyes filled with both fear and gratitude. His calm presence was comforting, and for the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of trust. She nodded slightly, though her body still shook. Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come." Jacob gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "You don't have to think about that now. Focus on resting. We need your strength for the journey ahead." Clara tried to follow his advice, but it was difficult. Her mind was racing, her imagination filling in every shadow, every sound with a new danger. The wind outside rattled the windows, and she flinched, thinking it might be the men returning. Breath, Jacob noticed, and moved a little closer, his hand gently resting near hers, not touching, just close enough to let her know he was there. Hours passed slowly. Clara's fear began to ebb slightly as she realized they were still safe, that the danger had not followed them to the cabin. She leaned back against the wall, staring at the firelight dancing across the wooden walls. Each flicker of light seemed to bring her a little comfort, reminding her that she was alive, that she had survived. She watched Jacob quietly, noting the way he seemed alert even in rest, ready to act if anything happened. There was something strong and protective about him that gave her courage, even if she was too afraid to speak it aloud. Finally, unable to keep the tension inside any longer, Clara whispered again, her voice barely audible. "Jacob, what if they come back? What if they find us even here?" His expression remained calm, though his mind was alert. "Then we deal with it," he said simply. "We'll be ready. But right now, there's nothing we can do except rest and stay quiet." That's what will keep us safe. Clara nodded, trusting him, though the fear had not completely left. She curled up closer to the fire, trying to let the warmth seep into her chilled bones. As she rested, her thoughts drifted to her home, the quiet life she had led before the attack. She thought of the small cabin, the fields she had tended, the simple meals she had prepared. Those memories were comforting but also painful, a reminder of what she had lost in a single day. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I just want it to be normal again, to feel safe and free." Jacob listened silently, understanding without judgment. He knew she needed to speak, to release the fear that had gripped her, and he did not interrupt. Time passed slowly. The moon moved across the sky, casting silver light through the small cabin windows. Clara's body trembled less now, though her mind still raced with worry. Jacob stayed close, never speaking unless necessary, allowing her the space to process her emotions while offering silent protection. He watched her carefully, noting every small movement, every change in expression. He could see the strength beneath her fear, the courage that had kept her going through the long hours of terror. Eventually, Clara spoke again, this time with a quieter, steadier voice. "I don't know how I can ever trust anyone again," she said softly, her eyes downcast. Jacob shook his head slightly. "You don't have to think about trusting anyone right now, Bay. Just focus on yourself, on getting through tonight. Trust can come later. Slowly. For now, we just survive the night." Clara nodded, appreciating his honesty. His words felt real, not like empty promises, and for the first time since the attack, she felt a tiny bit of hope. The night stretched on, each hour passing slowly but without incident. Clara began to relax a little more, leaning back against the wall, letting the fire's warmth calm her body. She glanced at Jacob and noticed the way he watched over her, silent and vigilant. But he was not just a rescuer. He was a protector, someone who had risked his life for her safety. That thought brought a sense of comfort she had not expected. Bust. Slowly she began to talk, sharing small details about her life before the attack, the dreams she had, the fears she carried. Jacob listened, offering quiet encouragement but not pushing her to speak more than she could handle. Their conversation was slow and careful, filled with pauses as Clara struggled with her emotions. But in those moments a bond began to form. She realized that despite the fear and danger, she was not alone. Jacob was there, steady and strong, a presence she could rely on. That realization brought a small measure of peace. She knew the night was not over, that the danger of the bandits could still be out there, but for now she felt protected, and that was enough. As the fire burned low, Clara's eyelids grew heavy. She tried to sleep but found it difficult. Every small sound, the creak of the cabin, the rustle of the trees outside, the shifting of the fire, made her flinch. Jacob noticed and quietly adjusted the blankets, moving closer to offer warmth without disturbing her. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "Nothing will happen while I'm here. You can rest." Clara closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her, and for a few precious moments she allowed herself to feel safe. The hours passed, and gradually Clara's breathing grew steadier. The trembling in her body began to ease, though her mind remained alert to the smallest sound. Jacob stayed close, keeping watch over her as she rested. In the quiet of the night, with only the soft crackling of the fire and the distant whispers of the forest, a fragile trust formed between them. She did not yet fully understand it, but she knew she could depend on him. That realization gave her courage, a sense that she could face the coming challenges with him by her side. "It doesn't turn out. Before dawn," Clara whispered again, her voice soft and full of gratitude. "Thank you for staying with me." "I was so scared." Jacob nodded, his expression calm but kind. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I'm here. That's enough." She closed her eyes, letting his presence comfort her. For the first time since her capture, she felt that maybe she could survive the night, that maybe she could begin to recover from the terror she had experienced. The first light of morning began to filter through the windows, casting a soft glow over the cabin. Clara opened her eyes slowly, feeling a little stronger, a little more at peace. Jacob stood nearby, alert and ready, but also relaxed now that the night had passed without incident. Clara smiled faintly, realizing that she had made it through the worst hours, that she was no longer completely alone, and that someone truly cared for her safety. The night had been long and full of fear, but it had also been a turning point. Clara had faced the terror of being chained and helpless, and she had survived. She had found a protector in Jacob, someone who had risked his own safety to ensure hers. Though the journey ahead was still uncertain, she felt a newfound courage. The bond between them was fragile but real, built on trust, respect, and the shared experience of facing danger together. And as the sun began to rise over the forest, casting warm light across the cabin floor, Clara felt a small, hopeful smile. She had survived the night, and with Jacob by her side, she believed that she could face whatever challenges the coming day might bring. The fear was still there, lingering in the corners of her mind, but it was no longer overwhelming. For the first time since her capture, she felt a sense of strength, of hope, and of the possibility of a future where she was no longer alone. The first light of dawn seeped through the small cabin windows, painting the wooden walls with soft golden hues. Clara stretched, her muscles stiff from hours of tension and fear, but she felt a little stronger than she had the night before. The long, terrifying night was behind her, and for the first time she felt a glimmer of hope. She looked at Jacob, who was standing by the door, quietly surveying the surroundings. He had not slept much, his eyes alert and sharp, ready for any sign of danger. "We should leave soon," Jacob said quietly, his voice steady. Clara nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Staying in one place for too long was dangerous. Though the cabin was hidden and safe for the night, the bandits could still be searching for her. They needed to move, to reach a place where she could truly be safe. Jacob packed a small bag with essentials, water, a few supplies, and some dried meat. He handed it to Clara, who took it with trembling hands. The weight was light, but it reminded her that their journey was not over. They stepped outside into the early morning air. Desperation. The forest was quiet, bathed in soft sunlight, filtering through the trees. The birds began their morning songs, and the dew sparkled on the leaves. For a moment, Clara allowed herself to breathe in deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. The world seemed calm, almost peaceful, but she knew better. Round and desp. Danger could appear at any moment, and she clung to Jacob's side as they began their journey. Jacob led the way, carefully choosing paths that would keep them hidden. He knew the terrain well and could avoid open areas where they might be spotted. Clara followed closely, trying to match his pace. Her body ached from the long night, and her mind was still heavy with fear, but she drew strength from his presence. Every time she stumbled, he caught her arm, steadying her. Every time she faltered, his calm voice encouraged her to keep going. Slowly, step by step, they moved through the forest. As the morning progressed, the forest began to thin, revealing the vast plains beyond. The sun rose higher, and the heat began to press down on them. Clara wiped the sweat from her brow and adjusted the bag on her shoulder. She was tired, but she refused to complain. She had survived worse, and the thought of reaching safety kept her moving. Jacob glanced back at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. Despite her fear, she had endured, and that strength impressed him. Along the way, they encountered challenges that tested both their courage and endurance. A fallen tree blocked their path, forcing them to find a way around it through thick underbrush. Thorns scratched Clara's arms and legs, leaving red marks that stung. Brask, Jacob carefully guided her, pointing out safer paths and helping her avoid the worst of the obstacles. At one point, a wild animal rustled in the bushes nearby. Clara froze, but Jacob stepped in front of her, making sure she remained safe. The animal passed without incident, but the moment reminded them both of the dangers that still existed in the wilderness. As they walked, Clara's mind wandered to thoughts of home and the life she had lost. She thought of her small homestead, the quiet mornings, the fields she had tended, and the simple pleasures she had taken for granted. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she whispered softly, "I want to go back, to feel normal again." Jacob did not answer immediately. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently, letting her know he understood without needing words. Then he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Braith, we will get you back safely. That's what matters. By step, we'll get there."
Hours passed, and the heat of the sun grew stronger.
Clara's legs were sore, and her energy waned, but Jacob kept her moving at a steady pace.
They drank water sparingly, careful to save enough for the journey ahead.
At one point, they paused by a small stream to rest and refill their water supplies. Clara cupped her hands and drank, the cool water refreshing her parched throat. She watched Jacob refill their bottles, appreciating the quiet efficiency with which he managed every detail. She realized that his strength was not just physical but also mental, the kind of calm determination that could face any challenge.
As they continued, the plains stretched endlessly before them, the horizon bright with sunlight. Clara felt a mixture of fear and hope.
She knew the bandits could still be searching for her, but she also knew they were moving towards safety. She looked at Jacob, noticing how focused and alert he remained even as the miles passed. His presence gave her courage, and she found herself trusting him more with every step. At one point, a small hill loomed ahead, offering a vantage point. Bess. Jacob motioned for Clara to stay low as they climbed. From the top, they could see the landscape for miles. In the distance, a small town appeared, with smoke rising from chimneys and the promise of safety. Clara's heart leapt at the sight.
Is that a town?
She whispered. Yes. That's where we're headed, Base. Almost there. A sense of relief washed over Clara, though she knew they were not completely safe yet. The final stretch would still require caution. As they descended the hill, they encountered a narrow path flanked by dense bushes. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reached their ears. Clara froze, her heart pounding. Jacob immediately crouched low and whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't move." Through the bushes, they saw a figure approaching, moving carefully as if searching for something. Jacob's hand found Clara's, giving her a reassuring squeeze. He waited until the figure passed, staying silent and hidden. Once the danger had gone, he whispered, "We're safe for now."
"Keep moving." Clara nodded, her pulse slowly returning to normal.
The final miles were long and exhausting, but the thought of safety kept them moving. Clara's energy waned and she stumbled several times, but Jacob's steady guidance helped her recover each time. They crossed fields, navigated small streams, and moved through patches of forest, always alert to the possibility of danger. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the plains. But the town they had spotted earlier was now closer, and Clara felt a renewed sense of hope. Finally, as the sun began to set, they reached the outskirts of the town. Jacob guided Clara to a small, secluded inn where they could rest safely for the night. The innkeeper, a kind and understanding man, quickly offered them food, water, and a place to sleep. Clara sank into a chair, exhausted but grateful. The fear that had gripped her for so long began to lift, replaced by relief and a growing sense of trust in Jacob. She looked at him, noticing the quiet strength and determination that had carried them through the journey. That night, as they sat by the fire in their small room at the inn, Clara spoke softly.
"I can't believe we made it, after everything that happened." Jacob gave a small nod. "We made it because we didn't give up."
Step by step we kept going. Clara smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the fire. She realized that the bond between them had grown stronger during the journey. Trust, respect, and a quiet understanding had formed, and she knew that she was no longer alone. They ate a simple meal, and Jacob helped Clara settle into bed. She lay down, her body sore, but her mind calmer than it had been in days. The journey was not over, but for the first time she felt a sense of hope. The town offered safety, and the bond with Jacob gave her courage. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the presence of Jacob soothe her mind. The world outside could still hold dangers, but she knew that together they could face them. Before sleep claimed her, Clara whispered softly, almost to herself, "Thank you for bringing me here, for keeping me safe." Jacob did not answer, but he remained nearby, alert and watchful. His presence was enough, a silent promise that he would not abandon her. And, as the night deepened, Clara allowed herself to rest, knowing that the journey had been hard, but that safety and hope were finally within reach. The town was quiet in the early morning light, the streets empty except for a few merchants opening their shops and a baker carrying fresh bread from his oven. Clara stepped outside the inn, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Breeze. The air smelled of fresh earth, baked goods, and the faint tang of horses from the nearby stables. After days of fear, running, and uncertainty, the world felt almost peaceful. But she inhaled deeply, letting herself enjoy the moment, however small it was. Jacob walked beside her, calm and steady, his eyes scanning the streets, as he had all along. But Clara had grown used to this careful vigilance. She had learned to trust him, to understand that his quiet watchfulness was a form of care. Every step she took with him beside her reminded her that she was not alone anymore. Her body was still sore, and her wrists and ankles throbbed faintly from where the chains had been. But the pain was bearable compared to the fear she had endured. They made their way to the small market at the center of town. Merchants called out their goods, fresh vegetables, cloth, and handmade tools. Children ran past, laughing, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the danger Clara had just escaped. She felt a pang of longing for a normal life, one filled with safety and simple pleasures. Fast. Jacob noticed the look on her face and gave her a reassuring nod. "It will come," he said softly. "You'll have your life back, and it will be safer now." Clara clung to those words, letting them sink in. The innkeeper had provided a small room for them to rest and recover. Clara spent the morning tending to her sore wrists and ankles. She cleaned the bruises, applied some soothing herbs, and bandaged the raw skin carefully. The act of caring for herself, of tending to her wounds, gave her a sense of control she had not felt since the attack. Jacob remained nearby, offering supplies and occasionally checking on her progress, his presence steady and reassuring. After a short rest, Jacob suggested they take a walk through the town to begin putting the fear behind them. Clara agreed, feeling a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. They moved slowly, sticking to quiet streets and observing the townspeople from a distance. Clara noticed how the ordinary sounds of daily life, the clatter of carts, the chatter of neighbors, the neighing of horses, felt comforting. It was a reminder that the world could be kind, even after the terror she had faced. As they walked, Clara began to speak more openly. She told Jacob about her life before the attack, how she had tended her homestead, the routines she had followed, and the dreams she had nurtured. Her voice grew steadier with each word, and Jacob listened without interrupting, giving her the space to share. The act of speaking, of recounting her own story, helped her reclaim a piece of herself that had been lost in the chaos of the past days. Jacob, too, shared pieces of his past. He spoke of his years living alone, his experiences on the frontier, and the losses he had endured. Clara listened quietly, realizing that behind his calm, strong exterior was a man who had faced hardship and isolation, just as she had. Their shared understanding, even without words, built a bond deeper than mere gratitude. It was a connection born of experience, of surviving danger, and of being present for each other when it mattered most. As the day progressed, they visited a small apothecary to gather supplies for Clara's recovery. The apothecary was kind and understanding, offering remedies for her bruises and advice on caring for her injuries. Clara felt a sense of normalcy returning, small steps that reminded her that life could continue. Best. Jacob handled the transactions quietly, giving her space to speak with the apothecary and learn about the remedies she would need. For the first time in days, Clara felt capable of taking care of herself, supported but not overprotected. After gathering supplies, they returned to the inn. Clara sat by the window, watching the town life continue outside. She felt a sense of relief, mixed with lingering caution. The fear of the attack had not entirely disappeared, but it had lessened. She realized that safety was not just about being physically unharmed. It was also about feeling secure in her surroundings, about trusting that the world could still be kind. Jacob remained nearby, a silent guardian, but she no longer felt the same helplessness that had gripped her in the chains. As evening approached, they shared a simple meal in the inn's small dining room. Clara ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Jacob watched over her with a calm attentiveness. The act of eating, of sitting quietly and sharing a meal, felt like a ritual of normalcy. They spoke little, but their presence together communicated more than words could. There was comfort in the silence, in the knowledge that neither of them had to face the world alone. After the meal, Jacob suggested a walk outside to watch the sunset. Clara agreed, grateful for the fresh air and the chance to see the sky change colors. They walked slowly, side by side along the edge of the town. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold. Clara paused to take it in, feeling a sense of peace she had not felt since before the attack. Jacob stood quietly beside her, sharing the moment without needing to speak. The beauty of the sunset reminded them both that even after darkness, light could return.
That night, back in the inn, Clara felt her mind begin to rest more easily.
The safety of the town, the warmth of the fire, and the steady presence of Jacob allowed her to sleep without the constant terror that had plagued her nights before. She dreamed not of chains or bandits, but of open fields, sunlight, and a future that held hope and safety. Jacob stayed nearby, alert but relaxed, letting her rest while remaining a silent guardian. Over the next few days, Clara began to rebuild her strength. She explored the town cautiously, learning about the people who lived there and the resources available. Each small step forward reinforced her confidence. Jacob remained by her side, offering guidance and protection but also allowing her space to reclaim her independence. Together they walked through the streets, visited the market, and shared moments of quiet conversation. With each passing day, Clara felt a sense of normalcy returning. a reassurance that life could continue even after fear. Through this time, the bond between Clara and Jacob deepened. She saw the kindness in his actions, the care in his attentiveness, and the quiet strength that had guided them through the wilderness. She realized that he had become more than just a protector. He was someone she could trust, someone who had shown that courage and compassion could exist even in the harshest circumstances. Jacob, in turn, recognized Clara's resilience and determination, her ability to face fear and move forward despite the traumas she had endured.
Their connection was mutual, built on respect, trust, and shared experience.
As days turned into a week, Clara began to make plans for her future. She spoke of returning to her homestead, of reclaiming the life that had been disrupted. But she knew it would take time, effort, and courage, but she felt ready. The support she had received in the town, along with the presence of Jacob, gave her the confidence to face the challenges ahead. She realized that she was no longer helpless or alone. She had survived the worst and was now ready to rebuild. Before leaving the inn to prepare for her journey home, Clara took a moment to reflect on the past days. She thought of the fear, the chains, the long night in the forest, and the journey through the plains. She thought of the moments of courage, the quiet strength she had found within herself, and the unwavering presence of Jacob.
He understood that her survival was not just about luck. It was about resilience, trust, and the support of someone who had cared enough to act when it mattered most. Jacob stood beside her, ready to accompany her back to the homestead if needed.
Clara looked up at him, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "Beth, for everything, for staying with me, for keeping me safe, for helping me find my courage again." Jacob gave a small, reassuring smile.
You don't have to thank me. You found your own strength along the way.
I just helped you see it. Together, they made their final preparations to leave the town.
Clara packed her belongings, careful to include the supplies that would help her recover fully. She felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, knowing that returning home would bring both comfort and challenges. Best. Jacob remained calm and steady, offering guidance and reassurance, ready to face any obstacles that might arise during their journey.
As they stepped outside into the morning light, Clara felt a renewed sense of hope.
The world was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty. It was a place where courage, kindness, and trust could guide her forward. With Jacob by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had also shown her the strength within herself and the power of connection and support. And as they walked toward the horizon, leaving the town behind and moving toward her homestead, Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in days. She was no longer trembling in chains, no longer consumed by fear. She was alive, strong, and ready to embrace the future, knowing that she would never be alone again.